That watch is stolen. Take it off. Now.
Excuse me? You want me to take off my grandfather's watch because you said so? Sir, you don't even know me.
That watch is stolen. Take it off. Now. Those were the first words Liam Rodriguez said to Claire Woods, a 12-year-old black girl, on a plane, in front of a full first-class cabin. He expected her to flinch. He expected her to look down. He expected the particular, practiced submission of a black child who has been taught that the safest response to white authority is silence and compliance. He had no idea who he was talking to. "Excuse me," Claire said, and her voice did not drop. It did not waver. It went up. "You want me to take off my grandfather's watch because you said so? Sir, you don't even know me." Rodriguez blinked. "I know what I see." "No," Claire said. "You don't. Because if you knew what you were seeing, you'd know this watch has been in my family since 1974, you'd know my grandfather wore it every single day of his life, and you'd know my mom put it on my wrist herself this morning. So whatever you think you're seeing, you're wrong." Silence. First class had gone completely still. Rodriguez leaned closer. His voice dropped to the register men use when they want to sound like a warning. "Young lady, that is a Patek Philippe. It is worth more money than I suspect you've ever seen in your life. And I am telling you it is stolen." Claire looked him dead in the eyes. "And I'm telling you it is mine. So what are we doing?" He told her he was calling the police. She told him to go ahead. He told her she didn't understand the trouble she was in. She told him the only person who was going to be in trouble was the one who was wrong, and that wasn't her. By the time the flight attendant appeared, Liam Rodriguez, Billionaire CO, $4.2 billion, silver hair, charcoal suit, was standing in a first-class aisle being talked back to by a 12-year-old girl who had not once looked away from him. And the cabin security camera had captured every single second of it. What you just witnessed was a white billionaire CEO deciding that a little black girl in a first-class seat could not possibly own the watch on her wrist. His name is Liam Rodriguez. Her name is Claire Woods. She is 12 years old. She is the daughter of a black waitress from Cincinnati, Ohio, and she earned her seat on that plane by winning a national academic competition, first place, out of thousands of students, at 12 years old. Liam Rodriguez looked at her and saw a thief. He did not see a scholar. He did not see a winner. He did not see a child wearing her late grandfather's most prized possession on the morning of the greatest achievement of her young life. He saw a little black girl in first class and decided that picture did not add up. What he did not see was the cabin security camera system, running from the moment of boarding, time-stamped, continuous, recording every word and every look and every second of everything he was about to do. And what he absolutely did not see coming was Claire Woods. Because Claire Woods does not shrink. Claire Woods does not go quiet. Claire Woods has been told her entire life that she will need to be twice as good in a world that sees her as half as much, and she took that information and turned it into something Liam Rodriguez was completely unprepared for. You saw the confrontation. Now we are going to tell you the full story, and walk you, step by step, through the moment that footage played back in front of law enforcement and dismantled everything Liam Rodriguez believed he knew. If you have ever watched a black child refuse to be diminished by someone who thought their money made them right, hit subscribe right now. Because this story is just getting started. Claire Elizabeth Woods was born on a Tuesday in March in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her mother, Diana Woods, was a black woman who had worked as a waitress for 11 years, first at a diner near downtown, then at a mid-range chain restaurant where the tips were slightly better and the hours were slightly longer. She had taken the job straight out of high school when other options closed, picked up double shifts whenever they were available, and built a life for her daughter in the Westwood neighborhood of Cincinnati with exactly what she had, which was grit and love and very little else. The house they lived in was a 3-bedroom rental with peeling paint on the shutters and a backyard that ended at a chain-link fence. There was no spare money. Diana worked 5 days a week, sometimes 6, and came home smelling like the restaurant, coffee and fryer oil and the specific exhaustion of a black woman who has spent 8 hours being invisible to the people she served. She changed her shoes at the door every night. She ate whatever was left over. And before she went to sleep, she checked on Claire. Claire grew up with 2 pieces of knowledge running parallel in her mind. The first was that she was loved, completely and without condition, by her mother and by the memory of the grandfather she barely remembered but thought about often. The second was that the world was going to require more from her than it required from others, not because she was less, but because it had decided she was, and it would take her entire life to keep proving it wrong. She heard this from Diana. She heard it from her grandmother. She heard it from every black adult in her life who had lived long enough to know it was the truth and loved her enough to say it plainly. And Claire, being Claire, did not receive this as a warning. She received it as a challenge. And she accepted. By 10, she had won 2 regional mathematics competitions. By 11, she was the top-ranked student in her entire school district in science and critical reasoning. She read obsessively. She worked through logic puzzles for fun, the kind that grown adults find genuinely difficult. She had the focused, unshowy, relentless drive of a child who has decided to be excellent and treats that decision as settled. She also had something else. Something that could not be taught and could not be practiced into existence. Claire Woods had a spine made of something that does not bend. She had always been this way. Her teachers knew it, Diana knew it, her grandmother had seen it in her eyes when she was 3 years old and announced at the dinner table that she disagreed with something a grown-up had said and was prepared to explain why. Claire did not do quiet acceptance. She never had. She was 12 years old and she had already understood, at a level most adults never reach, that silence in the face of a lie is its own kind of agreement. That quality, that refusal to bend, to shrink, to perform submission for people who had decided things about her without asking, would serve her in ways she could not have predicted on a Tuesday morning at Cincinnati Airport. At the start of the school year, Claire's teacher submitted her name for the National Young Scholars Academic Invitational, a competition run out of Washington, D.C. for the most academically gifted students in the country. Mathematics, science, critical analysis, written communication. Students from every state. Private schools with endowments the size of small nations. Families who hired specialist tutors for events like this. Claire had a kitchen table and a library card and 4 months of evenings. She won. First place. National level. 12 years old. From Westwood, Cincinnati, from a house with peeling paint and a mother who came home smelling like the restaurant. The prize included 2 first-class tickets to Washington, D.C. for the awards ceremony. On the morning of the flight, Diana pressed Claire's dress, packed their bags, and before they left the house, she went to the small wooden box on her dresser and took out a watch. It was a vintage Patek Philippe that Claire's grandfather, Raymond Woods, had bought secondhand in 1974. A black man who worked 30 years in a manufacturing plant, believed in showing up, believed in paying attention, and had saved his money for months for that watch, not because he was extravagant, but because he understood that some things you keep, some things you carry forward. He had died when Claire was 5. She remembered sitting on his lap, pressing her small finger against the glass face of that watch while the second hand moved, and Raymond saying, "Time is the one thing nobody can take from you, baby girl. Not if you use it right." Diana clasped it around Claire's wrist. Too big, adjusted to the tightest notch, still slightly loose. "Grandpa's coming with you," Diana said. Claire looked down at the watch. She looked up at her mother. "Then we're going to win twice," she said. Diana had photographed the watch the night before, because she was a black woman and a single mother and she had learned, through a lifetime of experience, that documentation is not paranoia. It is preparation. The photo showed the watch on Claire's wrist, the date visible on the calendar behind her, the detail of the face and the strap sharp and clear. The cabin security camera on that aircraft had been running since boarding began. It would keep running for the entire flight. And it would see everything. Cincinnati Airport was busy for a Tuesday morning. Diana and Claire checked in at the counter, and when the gate agent heard about the competition and the first place finish, she leaned forward with genuine delight. "First place? National level? I need to see that boarding pass so I know I'm talking to the real winner." Claire laughed, big easy, completely unguarded. The laugh of a 12-year-old who does not yet know that in about 90 minutes she is going to need every ounce of the fearlessness she was born with. They boarded early. Claire pressed herself into seat 2A and ran her fingers along the wide leather armrest and looked out the window at the tarmac and felt, for a moment, the full weight of what she had done. She had worked for 4 months in a house where money was tight and the stakes were real and nobody was going to do it for her. And here she was. First class. Washington, D.C. An award with her name on it. She pressed her grandfather's watch against her wrist. She thought about Raymond. Diana fell asleep against her shoulder. Claire opened her logic puzzle book. Puzzle 43. She was already 3 steps into the solution when the flight leveled out at altitude and the man in seat 3B, across the aisle and 1 row back, started staring at her wrist. She noticed him staring. She had always noticed when people stared. She gave it about 2 minutes before he spoke. She was right. It was peaceful. It was ordinary. It was the best morning Claire Woods had ever had. And then Liam Rodriguez decided to ruin it. If you can already feel where this is going and you are already pulling for this little girl, subscribe right now and stay with us. Because the way Claire handles what comes next is something you are not going to forget. Before we go on, drop a comment. When did you first learn that some people would always see a black child as a suspect first and a child second? Claire was 12. I want to hear from you. Liam Rodriguez was a white man built for first class in every sense of the phrase. He had come down the jetway behind his personal assistant, moving with the unhurried, proprietorial ease of someone for whom every room has always been arranged in advance. Tall, silver-haired, dressed in a charcoal suit that had been made specifically for him, he carried himself with the particular weightlessness of a man who has never once, in his entire life, walked into a space and wondered whether he was welcome in it. He moved down the first-class cabin. Row numbers. Passengers. The overhead space. And then his eyes found seat 2A. He stopped. Not dramatically. Just a breath. Just long enough to register what he was looking at. A small black girl, 12 years old, in a cream-colored sweater and neat braids, sitting in a first-class window seat with a notebook and a pencil and a watch on her left wrist that caught the cabin light in a way that made something shift behind his eyes. He kept walking to his seat in row 3. He arranged his things. And then he sat there and looked at her wrist. The watch. He looked at it the way you look at something you have already decided is a problem. Not curiosity. Conclusion. The specific, loaded attention of a white man who has looked at a black child in a space his assumptions have reserved for other kinds of people, and found the arithmetic troubling. Claire felt it. She had always been attuned to exactly this kind of looking, the looking that is not just looking, the looking that is a whole conversation being had without words. She glanced across the aisle. He was staring at her wrist. She looked back at her puzzle book. She gave him 2 minutes. He spoke at 90 seconds. Excuse me, where did you get that watch? Claire looked up. She took him in, the suit, the silver hair, the way he was leaning toward her with the practiced, polished expression of a man who believes he is being reasonable. She had seen that expression before, in different faces, in different contexts. She knew what it meant. It's my grandfather's, she said. Not particularly gently. That is a vintage Patek Philippe, Rodriguez said. Do you know what that is? Do you want me to tell you the year it was made, the movement type, or the approximate second-hand value in today's market? Claire said, because I can do any of those. My grandfather taught me about this watch when I was 4. Rodriguez blinked. This was not the response he had been expecting. He recalibrated. I'm going to be direct with you. I believe that watch may have been stolen. You believe it may have been stolen, Claire repeated. She put her pencil down. She turned to face him fully. Why? Because I recognize the piece. You recognize it from where? I have been collecting vintage timepieces for 20 years. And my grandfather bought this one secondhand in 1974, Claire said. His name was Raymond Woods. He wore it every single day until he passed away. My mom has kept it since then. She put it on my wrist herself this morning. So if you recognize it, either you knew my grandfather, or you're mistaken. And I don't think you knew my grandfather. The cabin around them had gone quiet in the way cabins go quiet when something is happening that everyone can feel. Rodriguez looked at this 12-year-old who was looking back at him with the calm, absolute confidence of someone who knows they are right and is not remotely interested in pretending otherwise. He tried again. I would like you to remove it and let me look at it. No, Claire said simply. Young lady. No. Same word. Same tone. No elaboration. No apology. No softening. Just the flat, clear, unmovable no of a person who does not owe a stranger her grandfather's watch and knows it. Rodriguez's voice went up slightly. I don't think you understand what I'm suggesting. I understand completely, Claire said. You're suggesting I stole this. I'm telling you I didn't. You don't have any evidence that I did. You have a feeling. And your feeling is wrong. He was louder now. The surrounding passengers had stopped pretending not to listen. Rodriguez pointed at her wrist. That watch is a stolen piece of property and I am going to have it recovered. Claire looked at his pointing finger. She looked back up at him. You are pointing at my grandfather's watch on my wrist and telling me it's not mine. With all due respect. Do better. Diana woke up. She came awake in an instant, one look, and she had the whole picture. Rodriguez leaning forward. Claire facing him directly, not a trace of fear on her face. The flight attendant frozen in the aisle between them. What is happening? Diana said. Your daughter, Rodriguez began. I've got it, Mom, Claire said, without breaking eye contact with Rodriguez. He thinks I stole Grandpa's watch. I've told him it's ours. He doesn't believe me. I'm waiting to find out what he plans to do about it. Diana looked at her daughter for a moment. Then she looked at Rodriguez with the clear, unhurried assessment of a black woman who has spent her life reading rooms and reading people and has just read this one completely. My father wore that watch every day for 31 years, Diana said. I have a photograph taken last night of my daughter wearing it, with yesterday's date visible in the frame. Would you like to see it? Rodriguez said. That could be manipulated. So your position, Claire said, is that my mom faked a photograph, and I snuck into first class, and I stole a watch from you specifically, and I've been sitting here doing logic puzzles and waiting to get caught? That's the theory. Several passengers in nearby rows made sounds. Not quite laughs. The noise people make when a child has just said something that an adult was thinking but would not have said. Rodriguez's face had moved through surprise and into something harder. He was not used to being challenged. He was especially not used to being challenged by a child who was treating his accusations less like a threat and more like an inconvenience she intended to dismantle at her leisure. I am going to call ahead and have law enforcement waiting at the gate, he said. Good, Claire said. He paused. Good. Yes, she said. Call the police. Please, call them right now. Because the faster they get involved, the faster they look at the camera footage on this plane, and the faster every person in this cabin gets to watch you explain yourself. She leaned forward slightly. Go ahead. I'll wait. Would a white billionaire really be undone by a 12-year-old girl? Liam Rodriguez was about to find out that yes, absolutely yes, he would. Because Claire Woods had just told him, to his face, that she wanted the police called. Keep that in your mind. A child with nothing to hide and everything to prove had just invited law enforcement into the situation herself. And Rodriguez, too far in to back out, made the call. He called ahead to the airline's ground operations team at Dulles. And the voice he used in that call was a completely different instrument from the one Claire had just dismantled. Gone was the debate. What replaced it was the flat, authoritative shorthand of a white man making a request to a system he trusted would comply. He described an uncooperative passenger. He used the word aggressive. He used the word threatening. He requested law enforcement at the gate. Claire heard the word aggressive. She turned to Diana. Diana was already looking at her. He called me aggressive, Claire said. Not hurt. Observational. Like she was noting a data point. I know, Diana said quietly. I have not raised my voice once. I know, baby. I'm 12. I know. Claire looked back at Rodriguez, who had finished his call and was sitting back with the satisfaction of a man who has deployed a resource and is now waiting for it to resolve the situation for him. She looked at him for a long moment. You described a 12-year-old as aggressive and threatening to get law enforcement to come to this gate, she said. You understand that's on record now, right? Everything you just said is logged somewhere. Rodriguez said nothing. Because I want you to think about what that record is going to look like, Claire said, when the camera footage shows I've been sitting here doing puzzles since before you even got on this plane. Diana put her hand on Claire's arm. Not to stop her, to steady her. And Claire sat back. She had said what needed to be said. Now they would wait. The cabin security camera had been recording since 8:14 that morning. It had Claire's wrist on video before Rodriguez had taken one step onto the aircraft. But Rodriguez did not know that. And in the 31 minutes between his phone call and landing, he sat in row 3 with the confidence of a man who believed he had set the right machinery in motion. Claire sat in seat 2A with the confidence of a girl who knew he was wrong and had already said so and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. The couple in row 4, a woman who had been watching this entire exchange with her jaw tight, caught Claire's eyes at one point and gave her a small, fierce nod. Claire nodded back. 2 passengers said nothing. 3 looked away. One man 2 rows back quietly took out his phone and began recording. He pointed it at row 3 and held it steady. Rodriguez noticed. Did not speak. 15 minutes from landing, Rodriguez made one final attempt. He stood and leaned over the partition. Last chance, he said. Hand it over. We end this here. Claire looked up from her puzzle book. She had gone back to puzzle 43. She had finished it and moved to 44. Last chance for what? She said. You've already called law enforcement. The situation is already in motion. The only thing handing you this watch would accomplish is letting you hold it until the police take it back off you and give it to me. So no. I'm good. Diana closed her eyes for 1 second. Then opened them. Sir, said the woman in row 4. Sit down. He sat down. The plane landed at 11:47 a.m. 2 airport police officers boarded before any other passenger stood. Rodriguez was on his feet immediately in the aisle, reaching them first. He was polished and authoritative and certain. He told them about the watch. He dropped his name. He used the word aggressive again. The officers nodded. They stepped past him. They walked to seat 2A, where a 12-year-old black girl was sitting with her documentation already out, her chin up, and an expression that said, I have been waiting for you. Let's get this done. Subscribe right now. Because what those officers see when they pull up that camera footage, and the look on Liam Rodriguez's face when they read it out loud, is the moment this entire story has been building toward. Tell me in the comments, have you ever watched a black child get accused of something and had to bite your tongue? What did it cost you to stay quiet? The officer asked Claire and Diana to walk him through what had happened. Diana spoke first, clear, ordered, factual. The competition. The tickets. The watch. Raymond. The photograph. She handed the officer her phone. He looked at it. He looked at the watch on Claire's wrist. He looked at the timestamp. Then he turned to Claire. Can you tell me about the watch yourself? Patek Philippe, Calatrava reference, Claire said. My grandfather Raymond Woods purchased it secondhand in Cincinnati in 1974. He wore it every day from then until his death. My mother kept it. She put it on my wrist this morning at approximately 7:15 a.m. at our home in Westwood before we left for the airport. There is a photograph taken last night with yesterday's date on the calendar behind me. There is a boarding record showing I was in seat 2A. And there is a cabin security camera on this aircraft that has been recording since we boarded at 8:14 a.m., which was before Mr. Rodriguez got on this plane. She paused. I'd like you to check the footage. The officer looked at this 12-year-old for a long moment. The recalibration was visible. The quiet, professional shift of someone who has just encountered something they were not expecting. From behind them, Rodriguez, the serial number. Sir, the officer said. Please wait. He turned back to Claire. The footage. Let's look at that. The airline supervisor arrived with a tablet. She loaded the cabin recording and cued it to the start of boarding. The timestamp read 8:14 a.m. The first passenger through the door was Diana, followed immediately by Claire. You could see her walk to seat 2A. You could see her reach up to the overhead bin. And as her left arm extended upward, clear, unmistakable, time-stamped, the watch was on her wrist. 8:14 a.m. The supervisor let it run. More passengers. And then at 8:31 a.m., Liam Rodriguez came down the aisle in his charcoal suit. The footage showed him glance at row 2. It showed him slow, barely half a second, and look at the watch on the wrist of the small black girl in the window seat. And then it showed him continue to row 3. 17 minutes. Claire had been wearing that watch for 17 minutes before Rodriguez had stepped foot on the aircraft. The camera had seen it. The timestamp had locked it in. There was nothing to argue with. There was nothing to reframe. There was just a number, 8:14, and everything that number meant. The supervisor read from the screen. Passenger in seat 2A, Claire Woods, boarded at 8:14 a.m. Watch visible on left wrist at time of boarding. Passenger in seat 3B boarded at 8:31 a.m. She looked up. The officer looked at Rodriguez. Rodriguez was staring at the tablet. The certainty he had carried onto that plane, down the jetway, across the tarmac of his own assumptions, it was not on his face anymore. What was on his face instead was something smaller and considerably less comfortable. "Sir," the officer said, "the footage shows the watch was on this child's wrist before you boarded the aircraft." Rodriguez opened his mouth. "Before you boarded," the officer said again. Not louder. Just clearer. The kind of repetition that is not for the listener's comprehension but for the record. There must be." "There isn't," Claire said from behind the officer. Her voice was not triumphant. It was not "I told you so." It was simply the flat, factual delivery of a person who has been saying the same true thing for 90 minutes and has finally been heard. There isn't a must be. It's 8:14 and 8:31. That's 17 minutes. The watch was on my wrist before you were on this plane. That's what happened. Rodriguez looked at her. And for the first time since this began, he had nothing to say back. "You used the word aggressive in your complaint to ground operations," the officer said, "to describe this child." He looked at Claire. He looked back at Rodriguez. He said nothing more. He did not need to. Rodriguez's assistant had taken several steps back. The physical language of a man quietly resigning from an association. What happened after that was methodical and complete. Rodriguez was issued a formal incident report, flagged with the airline for harassment of a minor and filing a false complaint with ground operations. The airline supervisor told him his account would be reviewed by the customer conduct team and the matter referred to their legal department. She said it the way people say things when they mean them. She looked at Diana and Claire while she said it, not at Rodriguez. Rodriguez tried once more. "It was an honest mistake. I genuinely believed. You presented a black child as aggressive and threatening to ground operations," the officer said. "That is on the record. Whatever you believed at the start, sir, those are the words you chose." Silence. "You'll need to come with us to complete the incident report." Rodriguez went. He walked off that plane last, through an empty first-class cabin, down a quiet jetway, into a terminal where his certainty had been replaced by a document and a timestamp and the memory of a 12-year-old girl who had told him, to his face, that he was wrong, and had been right about it from the very beginning. The supervisor came back to Diana and Claire and sat across from them and said, "I am sorry. I am sorry this happened on our flight. I am sorry it happened anywhere. You have our complete support in any action you choose to take." Diana nodded. She held Claire's hand. Claire nodded too. And then, after a moment, she said, "Can I ask you something?" The supervisor said yes. "He called me aggressive. In an official complaint. To get police sent to the gate." Claire's voice was even. It was not a complaint. It was a genuine question. A 12-year-old. He used that word about a 12-year-old. The supervisor held her gaze. "Yes. He did. Is that in the record? The exact word?" "It is." "Good," Claire said. "I want it to stay there." They found seats near a window in the terminal. Diana put her arm around her daughter. And Claire, who had been fearless and unfiltered and fully herself from the moment Rodriguez had pointed at her wrist, finally let herself come down from it. Not crying. Just still. The particular stillness of someone who has been running on adrenaline and rightness and is now, finally, allowed to just sit. Diana held her. The watch was on Claire's wrist. right where it had always been. An officer came with water and took their full statements and offered his card if they chose to pursue charges. Diana thanked him and said she would be in touch. "For what it's worth," he said before he left, "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've never seen a kid handle something like that the way your daughter did." Diana looked at Claire. "I have," she said. "Subscribe and stay right here." Because when the internet sees what Claire said to a billionaire on that plane, the response is something nobody, not Liam Rodriguez, not his PR team, not his lawyers, was ready for. Comment: what did you think when Claire said, "Go ahead, call them, I'll wait"? Tell me below. That evening, the man who had been recording from row 5 posted his footage on X, formerly Twitter. He described what he had seen. He attached the clip. 37 seconds. No editing, no commentary, no production. Just a phone camera pointed at row 3 and the inside of a first-class cabin where a white billionaire was standing over a black child and the black child was looking at him like he was a problem she had already solved. His caption: White CEO accuses 12-year-old black girl of stealing her grandfather's watch in first class. She told him to call the police himself. Airline Cctv proved she had the watch on before he even boarded. I watched the whole thing from row 5. He called her aggressive in the complaint. She's 12. By morning it had 4 million views. By the second day, 7. It spread the way this kind of footage spreads when it captures something that millions of people recognize from the inside out, not as observers but as participants, as people who have their own version of this story, who have stood in their own seat 2A and been looked at and assessed and found wanting by someone who had not asked a single question before arriving at their conclusion. But there was something different about this clip. Something that separated it from the dozens of similar videos that had come before it, that had generated their own cycles of outrage and hashtags and corporate statements and been absorbed into the continuum of documented American racism and then moved past. Claire fought back. Not physically. Not even loudly. But she looked Liam Rodriguez in the face and told him his theory was wrong, asked him to explain his evidence, invited him to call the police, and went back to her puzzle book. And the internet, which had watched hundreds of videos of black people enduring, surviving, documenting, and being vindicated, had rarely seen a 12-year-old black girl respond to a white man's accusation not with fear or even with dignity but with the calm, unimpressed pushback of someone who finds the accusation less frightening than factually incorrect. The clip was clipped into clips. The moment she said, "So what are we doing?" was looped and set to music. The moment she said, "Go ahead, I'll wait," became a caption format. Her face, impassive, direct, entirely unbothered, became a reaction image that people used to respond to anything they found tedious and incorrect. Claire Woods, 12 years old, from Westwood, Cincinnati, became the internet's favorite unbothered black girl. And Liam Rodriguez became the example. Within 48 hours, he was identified completely. His company, his institutional clients, his board memberships, his social media accounts were found, archived, and circulated before his team had time to deactivate them. 2 major clients issued statements announcing they were reviewing their association with his firm. A philanthropic foundation quietly removed all reference to its partnership with his company from its website. 3 more business relationships went silent, not formally ended, but producing the specific silence that in financial circles needs no translation. The airline released a statement: "We stand fully behind Claire Woods and her family. The conduct directed toward this passenger is not consistent with our values. We have taken appropriate action." They did not name Rodriguez. They did not need to. Everyone already knew. He earned a name. First Class Liam. Within a week it had detached from the original story and become a shorthand, a name for a category of white certainty, for the specific phenomenon of a white person deciding that a black person's presence in a particular space is itself suspicious and needs to be explained away. The phrase, "Go ahead, I'll wait," Claire's words, spoken at altitude to a billionaire who had just told her he was calling the police, became its own vocabulary. It spread through comment sections and quote tweets and caption formats. It was used in contexts that had nothing to do with the original incident. It was used by people who had never heard of Claire Woods or Cincinnati or the National Young Scholars Academic Invitational. A 12-year-old black girl from Westwood had given the internet a phrase. But here is the thing that needs to be said clearly, in the middle of all of this. Claire Woods did not post that video. She did not go looking for a platform. She did not want to be a symbol or a reaction image or a caption format. She wanted to fly to Washington, D.C. with her mother, collect an award she had spent 4 months earning, and come home. That was the plan. What she got instead was a lesson, delivered early, delivered harshly, delivered at 35,000 feet by a man in a charcoal suit, in what it means to be a black child in America. In what the belonging tax looks like when it is applied to a first-class cabin. In the specific, documented, thoroughly researched phenomenon known as racial profiling, the phenomenon in which a black person's presence in a space is treated by white observers as evidence of something, as a picture that needs explaining, as an arithmetic problem that does not add up. Let me name it plainly, because the euphemisms have been softening this truth for too long. What Liam Rodriguez did was look at a black child and decide she was a criminal. Not because of anything she had done. Not because of any evidence. Because she was black, and she was there, and the watch on her wrist produced, in his mind, an equation that he had decided she could not be the solution to. This is not uncommon. This is not unusual. This is documented extensively across decades of research in retail environments, in traffic stops, in housing applications, in academic assessments, in medical settings, in courtrooms and classrooms and every other space where assumptions are made before questions are asked. Black children are assessed as less innocent than white children of the same age. Black adults are presumed guilty in spaces where white adults are presumed welcome. Black families are required to prove what white families are assumed to own. Raymond Woods saved his money in 1974 and bought a watch secondhand and wore it every day for 31 years. His daughter kept it. His granddaughter wore it on the morning of her greatest achievement. And a white man looked at that watch on that wrist and decided, in the time it takes to walk past a row on an airplane, that it could not belong to her. That is the belonging tax. That is what black people pay, in energy and documentation and vigilance and the grinding, perpetual work of proving what should never need proving. Claire paid it that morning. Diana has been paying it her entire life. Raymond paid his own version of it, in his own time, in ways we can only imagine. And the fact that Claire paid it with her chin up and her voice even and a 12-year-old's complete, magnificent refusal to be made small, that does not make the tax less real. It makes it more visible, which is the only thing any of us can actually do with it. Subscribe. Because what Liam Rodriguez does next, the apology, the new account, the lawyer-written statement, and what it costs Claire in ways that no camera captured, is Act 5. And it is the most important part of this story. Comment. What would you have said in Claire's position? Could you have stayed that cool? Be honest below. 10 days after the clip crossed 7 million views, Liam Rodriguez posted a public statement. His original accounts had been deactivated. The Instagram, the X account, the LinkedIn page with its board memberships and keynote appearances. The statement appeared on a new account, freshly created, with no history and no followers and the specific emptiness of a page built for one task and nothing else. It was carefully written. Every sentence had passed through lawyers. You can always identify this kind of language by what it is missing. Missing specificity, missing acknowledgement, missing anything that could be used as an admission. What remains is the shape of accountability without the weight of it. Apology adjacent. Remorse adjacent. The linguistic structure of a person who has been advised to seem sorry without being sorry in any way that could be cited in a deposition. He wrote that he had acted out of genuine concern and made a significant error in judgment. He wrote that he deeply regretted the distress his actions had caused. He used the phrase unconscious bias, the phrase you use when you want to acknowledge that something happened while simultaneously explaining that you did not choose it and therefore are not entirely responsible for it. He committed to education and growth. He did not name what education. He did not describe what growth. He did not say the name Claire Woods once in the entire statement. He did not contact Diana. He did not contact Claire's school or the competition or any scholarship fund. He posted to a new account and waited for the cycle to move past him. Claire and Diana never responded. Not publicly. Not privately. Not one word. Not ever. Because Diana understood, with the bone-deep clarity of a black woman who has spent her life watching powerful people manage their reputations at the expense of people like her, that a statement issued under legal and financial pressure is not an apology. It is the thing you produce when your silence costs more than your words. It is drafted by counsel, timed for the news cycle, released by someone whose primary motivation is protecting what they have left, and it lands on the world with all the moral weight of a press release, because that is exactly what it is. Real accountability does not wait for a new account because the old one is a liability. Real accountability does not describe the harm it caused as distress in passive language while avoiding any direct description of what it actually did. Real accountability looks at a 12-year-old black girl and her mother on an airplane and says, out loud in the moment, I am wrong. I looked at your child and I made an assumption. I made it because of what she looks like. And I am sorry. That plane had landed. That moment was gone. And unconscious bias is not a phrase that 12-year-old Claire Woods can hold in her hands and use to put back what was taken. 6 months after the flight, Claire Woods was back in school in Westwood, Cincinnati. Still the top-ranked student in her district. Her teacher had submitted her name for 2 additional programs. The national invitational paperwork for the following year was already in motion. University early engagement programs had added her name. The future she had been building was still being built, and it was bright, and it was entirely the product of her own extraordinary work. She still wore the watch. Every day. Tightest notch. Slightly loose. The second hand still moved. But something had changed. Not in Claire's fire, that was still there, undiminished, recognizable to everyone who knew her. She was still the kid who would tell you plainly when you were wrong. She was still the kid who asked questions adults found uncomfortable and waited for real answers. She was still, constitutionally and completely, herself. What had changed was underneath the fire. She noticed who watched her in public now. She noticed it in the specific, cataloging way, not the observation of a curious child but the vigilance of someone who has been given a concrete reason to track it. She noticed which white people's eyes moved to what she was carrying. She noticed who looked twice. She noticed the small, barely visible recalibration of expression when she walked into a room or a store or a lobby that certain kinds of people had not expected her to be in. She had always been perceptive. Now she was watchful. The difference between those two things lives in the body. It does not rest. When she wore the watch in public, she was aware of wearing it. Not ashamed, never ashamed. Raymond's watch was hers. Raymond was hers. That had been established, by a camera and a timestamp, in front of law enforcement at an airport gate, and it was not something she was ever going to feel conflicted about. But she was aware. In the way that something you have been made to fight for stays present even after you have won. Diana kept the photograph in 3 places now. She had added more documentation since then. Close-ups of the serial number, a photo of the worn clasp, a scan of an old picture of Raymond wearing it in 1981 at a family gathering, squinting into the sun. She did not do this out of fear. She did it out of the hard, clear-eyed pragmatism of a black woman who has learned that preparation is not the same as defeat. That documenting what is yours is not an admission that the world has the right to question it. It is simply the architecture of a life that will not be caught unprepared again. Claire noticed her mother adding to the folder. She said nothing. She understood. This is what racial profiling costs a family beyond the incident itself. Not just the 90 minutes at altitude. Not just the officers at the gate or the incident report or the viral clip. The cost that does not make the news is the permanent recalibration, the watchfulness that becomes part of your posture, the documentation that becomes part of your routine, the awareness that moves into the back of your mind and does not leave. The weight of knowing that your presence in any space can be treated as a question by someone who has never been required to answer for their own. Claire had answered it. She had answered it with a camera and a timestamp and a 12-year-old's refusal to perform fear for a man who had decided she was guilty before she had said one word. She had answered it in front of officers and supervisors and a gate full of witnesses and a clip that had been watched 7 million times. But the question should never have been asked. Liam Rodriguez saw a little black girl in a first-class seat wearing an old watch, and he saw a crime. He did not see Raymond Woods, a black man who saved his money and bought a watch in 1974 and wore it until he died because some things you keep and some things you carry forward. He did not see Diana, a black waitress who worked double shifts for 11 years and raised a daughter who could walk into any room in the world and hold her ground in it. He did not see a national champion. He did not see a granddaughter. He did not see a child. He saw a little black girl in first class and decided the picture was wrong. The security camera proved him wrong. The timestamp proved him wrong. The incident report documented his choices. The financial world reflected the cost of them. The internet spread Claire's face and Claire's words, "Go ahead, I'll wait," until they became a shorthand for something larger and older and more American than one flight. And none of that gives back what a white man's certainty took from a 12-year-old black girl at 35,000 feet. Not the lightness of a black child who has not yet been treated like a suspect in a space she earned. Not the ease of wearing her grandfather's watch without calculating who might be watching. Not the simple, uncomplicated joy of sitting in a seat and looking out the window and feeling, without qualification or condition, like you belong. Claire is still fearless. She has always been fearless and she will always be fearless. That is not something Liam Rodriguez had the power to take. But fearlessness is not the same as freedom. You can be fearless and still be carrying weight. You can look a white billionaire in the eyes and tell him he's wrong and still go home changed. Courage and cost are not opposites. They can live in the same body. They lived in Claire's. Prejudice does not need truth. It never has. It does not need evidence or a grievance that makes sense when examined. It needs only a moment, an aisle, a watch catching the light, a face that conflicts with an assumption, and the specific total certainty of someone who has never had to prove, not once, that they belong. That certainty is not earned. It is inherited, and it is costing us our children. Claire Woods proved she belonged. She proved it on a national stage, and she proved it in a first-class cabin, and she proved it on camera at a gate at Dulles International. She proved it with footage and timestamps and a 12-year-old's complete, unbowing refusal to be made into anything less than what she is. She should not have had to prove it at all. That is not her burden to carry alone. It has never been her burden to carry alone. It is ours, all of ours, and we have been putting it down and picking it up and setting it down again for a very long time. What we do with it now is the question. Thank you for watching this. If this story stayed with you, share it. Not for the algorithm. Not for the outrage. But because Claire Woods is not the first black child to be accused before anyone asked a question, and until we are willing to sit with that fully and honestly, she will not be the last. Hit subscribe. Leave a comment. And tell someone about this video today. Final question, and I want a real answer, not just agreement. What specific thing are you going to do differently, in your own life and in your own spaces, after watching this story? Not what should Liam Rodriguez do. Not what should the airline do. What are you going to do? Leave it in the comments. I will read every single one.